Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. I'm Josh Norris. That's John Daigle. That's Ian Hartitz. Guys, how are we?
1 or 2 days away from the best day of the year. I couldn't be better.
Depending when you're listening to this. Maybe it's the morning of Thanksgiving.
Are you fasting already?
Great.
Pretty much. I'll eat like tonight.
Isn't that just normal, though?
One meal a day keeps the doctor away.
Yeah, that's just normal. It's not fasting if it's normal.
Ian, again, we've only worked together for like 3 or 4 or 5 months. Who's keeping track at this point?
Who's counting?
But what I do pick up and observe about you is that you have this like pre-podcast ritual. And I'm not going to tell the people out there what it is, but it gets me curious because you at some point were athletic and played sports.
At some point, shots fired. So
I'm wondering what your pregame routine was every single time. Because it's obvious that you have to hype yourself up. You have to get yourself going. There had to be something, because you have, your tendencies, your quirks. I've picked up on those as well.
Well, pregame back in the day, like we'd actually hit people in, the pregame, so that was fine to get the energy out. But now,
like punch to face?
We just tackle, form up a little bit, get the juices flowing.
Oklahoma drill?
Yeah, it's kind of hard, not quite, but it's kind of hard to punch you guys before shows. So I like to, I like to chin check myself a couple times. Okay. I see Nate Diaz do it before his big fights, and if you want to be the biggest BMF in the fantasy football industry, you got to take after the best sometimes.
I could totally see you, like, if your walk from the locker room to the field went underneath the bleachers, you are absolutely the person who would, like, pound on the metal to pump yourself up and get everyone else going as well.
Hey, look good, feel good, play good, Josh.
Okay. Well, that's it. Today's episode, as you know, is going to be a Thanksgiving Day preview. There are 3 games. Some good, some bad. We'll make them entertaining for you along the way. We need to start with a little bit of news. There have been a quarterback change across the league, and it's Andy Dalton now returning as the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. From a wins-loss perspective, well, this might impact it, but it's not as much of a big deal, Daigle, as the Bengals looking towards the number 1 overall selection. Because when this popped up, it was more of like me saying, I have no idea why they're doing this. Do you agree?
It just blurs the line between business and, I guess, selling tickets. Like, I know people argue, like, well, they care about the team, they care about the fans. Like, if you want to sell tickets, look at it long term. You're probably selling less tickets if you start Andy Dalton this year because that doesn't lock you in on Chase Young or Tua or Burrow, whichever way you want to go. So it's just kind of means that they're done evaluating Ryan Finley in my mind. Like, they had seen enough of Ryan Finley. And to be honest, I've seen enough of Ryan Finley. Yeah, so we don't need to see it anymore. It's just, it was really confusing. It's just something that was swept under the rug. It's like, yeah, you're going back to Andy Dalton, whatever.
I mean, they were 0-8 with Dalton. He was having the worst year of his career, which, yeah, we know Andy Dalton is a sum of his parts quarterback, and this is the worst Bengals offense he's probably been playing without A.J. Green. So, I don't know. I get it. It reminds me of the Miami situation a little bit where, like, you can't just continue to put the worst QB out there and expect the rest of the team to play hard. So, for better and for worse, I think they just had to make this move. How can you keep putting Finley out there when the guy is clearly the worst quarterback in the entire league?
Because now, at 0-11, isn't the ultimate goal to get the number 1 overall selection? And maybe they already have locked it up. And I guess that's where I disagree with the Bengals here, because if the overall plan is to get the number 1 overall pick, then this decision goes against that. And so it makes me think there actually is not a plan. And that's an issue. And I think that even if we don't know the details of what went into this decision, I think we can surmise based on the Bengals not having sustained success for years and years and years that they have been able to formulate a plan no matter what. Because we knew the Dolphins, based on their roster decisions, was going to be a bad football team. Now, they still played hard. The coach is still coaching. And they've won, I think, 2 games because of it, right?
Yep.
But the Bengals did not make those same moves. They kept on A.J. Green. They kept with other pieces. Yet they are 0-11 right now. And so I don't think there is a big plan in place here, Daigle.
They gave up. I know, so they traded up for him, obviously, right? They gave up the number 110, 183, and 198 to move up to number 104 overall to get this guy. And then
Ryan Finley.
To get Ryan Finley. They traded up for him. And now they gave him, 3 starts? And that's pretty much all we needed to see in his time. So you're asking for a direction. And to be honest, if we ask them, I don't think they have a direction, right? Like, that's why they're a middling team. That's why they continue
Well, there's no vision, and that's the issue.
Well, yeah,
that's
there hasn't been a vision since Carson Palmer, though. Like, once his ACL went down, the franchise went down.
Well, clearly, if there is a vision, it's not being it's not working between a general manager and the coaching staff. I think if you're going to do this, if you're going to tank, you need the front office and the coaching staff to be on the same page. Otherwise, when you're 0-11, your coach thinks he's going to get fired if they don't win a game. So that's why you make decisions like this. So I don't know if they do have a grand vision. I would probably bank on no, but if they do, it's definitely not being communicated throughout the entire organization.
It wasn't all Andy Dalton's fault anyways, right? It's
No.
just the whole organization from the top down. Running backs were getting hit. They averaged negative yards before contact because their offensive line is arguably the worst in the league. Like, they're terrible. So I don't know what the direction is this year. I don't know what the direction is moving up forward. It's just it makes me angry talking about it the morning after watching the Ravens play because we have one organization literally doing everything right and getting out of their own way and doing what's best for the players they have on hand, and then another that are in over their heads in every aspect of football.
I know I keep going back to this, but if Andy Dalton was a starting quarterback in the last couple weeks against the Oakland Raiders, against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
They beat the Raiders.
Those were very winnable games. They
Yes.
probably beat the Steelers as well.
Probably.
And then coming up are the New York Jets, the Cleveland Browns twice, and the Miami Dolphins. What if they win 2 of those games? Okay? And then they're stuck with the Redskins, stuck with maybe a couple other teams with 2 or 3 wins, possibly. That's changing what this team could be in 2020. That's changing the order of what pick you're going to have. And I just cannot believe there are 32 of these teams across the league. How does someone just not want to have the best chance of succeeding in the future by spoiling and poisoning the short-term gains? And that's what starting Andy Dalton is.
I think the problem is that, like, the Dolphins are doing it good because, like you said, they traded away all their good players.
There was a plan in Miami.
I'm saying in Miami, like, there are not better players on the bench that could be in the game.
Because
like,
they traded them all away.
Exactly.
Yes.
If the Bengals were doing that, like, they wouldn't be having this problem. That's why.
But the Dolphins are also not having the number 1 pick right now because of those decisions that were made.
And the Dolphins have done a much better job than the Bengals. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Right.
I'm saying I don't blame Zach Taylor for going back to Dalton because if you have someone that's just every single day at practice outperforming the guy that's starting above him, like, you just can't do that for an extended period of time.
Before we move on, does this make the Bengals players any more rosterable, any more startable as we head on? Because Tyler Boyd, had a great week this past weekend, yet the prior week had 1 catch for 0 yards. We might see A.J. Green now based on Andy Dalton returning to the lineup because A.J. Green is just being day-to-day but missed multiple games. Joe Mixon is another name involved as well.
You're forgetting someone.
Who am I forgetting?
Auden freaking Tate. Will you put some respect on this guy's name? All he does is make any catch on any ball thrown in his general vicinity. But, okay, I think it does help the auxiliary receivers. I think Joe Mixon is the biggest loser here because they fed him 63 carries over the last 3 games because even they were down, they weren't about to let Finley keep throwing the ball. And it's just kind of ironic because Mixon was one of the players that came out on Twitter and said how happy he was to have Dalton back under center. So, I don't know. You're still in one of the league's worst offenses with or without Dalton in there. But Boyd, yeah, it helps.
Tyler Boyd led the team with nearly a 25% target share while Andy Dalton was under center. And that was, of course, with John Ross in and out of the lineup. With John Ross, he had a 19% target share, averaged 8 targets per game in those first 4 contests. So we'll see about his injury the rest of the way. I wouldn't think A.J. Green comes back because the difference in profit A.J. Green makes, whether he plays this season or not, is pretty much the difference in ticket counts from Andy Dalton starting over Ryan Finley. It doesn't matter whatsoever. So you can lean on Tyler Boyd, whereas we saw Ryan Finley even tank Tyler Boyd's ceiling. I know it was good this past game, but we saw against, I believe it was the Raiders game. It was just an absolute disaster.
All right, let's go to Thanksgiving Day games. There are 3 of them. The first one is the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. We know Detroit is 3-7-1, and the Bears are actually 5-6, and they're 2.5-point road favorites here. We're not exactly sure, recording this podcast on a Tuesday, if Jeff Driscoll is going to play. I believe he got hurt, was injured. He also had probably his worst performance of the season. I think he's
bad.
If he plays to his good potential, his peak, I think he's the best quarterback in this game.
Ooh.
Better than Mitch.
Really?
Yes.
I think they're very similar quarterbacks. I think Mitch is actually playing a little better the last few weeks.
Last week he did play a lot better.
Turnovers are really bad this past week, but other than that, yeah.
And there were more that were dropped as well.
Yeah, he had Ben Broniker, though, like right in the face, and it should have been a 20-yard touchdown or so. But even he had the terrible Rams game, but even that first Lions game, I thought he was at least okay. I mean, look, either way, like, we're arguing about two quarterbacks that aren't among the top 25 in the league. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but the problem with Driscoll right now is he's got this hamstring injury, which limited him, and so much of his upside, particularly fantasy, has been rushing based. I mean, in these starts so far, he's had 37, 51, 63 rushing yards. Now, against a Bears defense that we all know Khalil Mack in that pass rush, if you're going to limit the one thing he does really well, like, that's really troublesome to me.
David Blough, if we see him in an NFL game on primetime while I'm eating stuffing, I'm going to get really upset. The fourth stringer for Cleveland this preseason completed just 58% of his passes, was 25 of 43 for 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Obviously waived and now suddenly put in position to potentially start over Driscoll. It would be a disaster, and it would force everyone to basically bench Marvin Jones for sure. Yep. And Kenny Golladay would move to a wide receiver 3. I don't think that's not hyperbole, right? Wide receiver 3 if David Blough's under center?
No, I think
I had to look up who that was, and I got reminded he broke my Ohio State heart last year.
I was just about to bring this up because that was a primetime matchup. That was him basically being, I think, carried off the field. You must have some very negative thoughts towards Mr. David here.
I do now that I remembered who he is.
It's
damn, man.
For the other side, though, for Trubisky, season high 7 carries last week. That's interesting. Maybe it's a fluke, right? Especially since they hadn't been leaning on him that way.
And that's the difference between Mitch right now and then Mitch in 2018, because he's never been a good passer. He's never been a consistent passer. He's never been one who's been sustaining success in that area. But while Driscoll, and I totally think that they are similar passers, Driscoll's the one who's been running. And I think it's, and I'm no doctor, but we've seen Mitch wear a harness on his non-throwing shoulder the entire year. So that has basically played into it. Yet, when it was third down near the goal line, Matt Nagy still coaching for his job. He called a design power run to get Mitch into the end zone. And that's important. And I'm not saying any of us want to wager our Thanksgiving Day on Mitch Trubisky tearing up this awful, awful Lions defense. But if Matt Nagy can even keep his job, and that's a big if right now, if Ryan Pace can do the same thing, then it does come down to Mitch carrying this offense to at least 20-plus points per game. It's
not like Mitch has gotten slower. I don't think it's, like you said, it's him not really wanting to run when he's injured. And that's, I mean, the split I found was he missed those 2 games last season where Chase Daniel to come in. Before then, he was almost every single weekend, at least 30 rushing yards per game. But since then, I think he's only passed that mark once or twice, if at all. So, you know, again, he can do it. When you watch him run around, it's okay. That's like the best part of Mitch Trubisky's game is when he actually starts running and he takes his eyes away from downfield. But we'll see if it goes week to week. The one problem could be Taylor Gabriel in a concussion protocol. And I don't know, if you're taking away the one guy in that offense that can stretch the field, now it's just even more problematic.
What are the positives with David Montgomery right now?
Volume.
None. Oh yeah, okay, volume, sure.
But for a guy
usage-based every week, that's
for a guy who led college football in broken tackles last year, and so many of them were behind the line of scrimmage and near the line of scrimmage, he's basically just running into his own blockers, running into defenders this year, and it's been awful to watch.
And I believe they only had, 4 picks in the draft and still traded up.
Correct,
to
after
get
signing
him.
Mike Davis.
So limited picks and still traded up after giving Mike Davis that guaranteed money. Very confusing.
We heard these broken tackle historic rates for Montgomery all offseason.
Yeah.
And here we are, 12 weeks into the year. There are 2 running backs that have a worse elusive rating per PFF than David Montgomery this season. David Johnson and Kalen Ballage. Like, that is miserable.
Yeah. I think the sneaky play in this game, though, so you're firing up Allen Robinson anyways, right? Even though against Darius Slay, who cares? But for Anthony Miller to have seen 20 targets, 10 in each of the past 9 games, Taylor Gabriel's absence, and we're assuming he's going to be absent because you have to clear protocol by Thursday, would vacate 5.7 targets and a very nice 69 air yards per game since Chicago's bye. Anthony Miller not only has a floor, but I would rank him, as I was doing rankings because we have to get him out so early for Thanksgiving, I actually ranked him over Juju Smith-Schuster, Brandon Cooks, and you can stop me and tell me when I'm wrong here because I may be wrong, Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, keep going.
And Larry Fitzgerald this week.
Okay.
And that's assuming Taylor Gabriel's out.
So offended I can't even think right now.
Speaking of rookies, I'm stunned, shocked, whatever you want to say, that T.J. Hawkinson is not playing more.
Well, he was injured.
I don't understand it.
He was injured, and he still ran a route on, I believe it was 69% of Driscoll's dropbacks last week.
This isn't the first time, though. Even like when he was been healthier, it's still a 60 to 70% snap rate. And they spent all this money on Jesse James randomly in the offseason. Now they
drafted Hawkinson high, yeah.
Yeah, and now they're like also getting Logan Thomas involved. I don't have anything against Jesse James or Logan Thomas. Like, when we're talking about these, like, why isn't Josh Jacobs playing more? Like, Jalen Richard's fine too. But when you spend a first-round pick on one of these guys, you're not even giving them a full-time role when they're playing well with their opportunities. I just don't understand it.
I'm going to quickly tee this one up for Ian. I hope he has in his notes because I saw his tweet yesterday, and it was good.
Thank you.
If we get Driscoll under center, and we need Driscoll because he presents a threat, whereas Blah, we know, does not. Bo Scarborough ranks the past 2 weeks number 9 in yards per contact yards per contact per attempt, and running backs who have seen at least 10 carries, right, the past 2 weeks. Only 50% of snaps, but has handled 76% of Detroit's backfield carries in that span. And Chicago doesn't have Hakeem Hicks and probably won't have Danny Trevathan. It's actually a really good spot. But since he is a standard play only, really, he's only run 11 routes last 2 weeks. He's only seen one target in that span. You really need Jeff Driscoll to play to consider Scarborough like a DFS option and RB4.
Yeah, Hakeem Hicks has been the low-key reason why I think we've seen the Bears just go from world-beating defense, historically good, to they are not terrible. They're okay. I think they're actually still very good.
They got below average, not terrible. How about
their
that?
offense does them absolutely no favors. They haven't had guys like Eddie Jackson or Roquan Smith, play at that high level. So it's. I'm not going to say terrible, though.
That's fine. They got beat up by Todd Gurley 2 weeks ago and then stopped the 2019 version of Barkley, which everyone does, so who cares?
Beat up by him, I get it. But, again, that was one of those games where, okay, when you give a running back 28 carries and your offense scores 7 points, I mean, what's going to happen?
That's fair.
So let's move on. The Buffalo Bills visit the Dallas Cowboys again on Thanksgiving. Cowboys, despite being just 6-5 and hosting the 8-3 Bills, are 7-point favorites in this game. It's odd to me because Buffalo has a better record. They're coming off a win, yet they are a touchdown underdog here, Daigle, and that's not a spread that we should take lightly.
No, even though I go from thinking the Cowboys can handle the Patriots defense, then they didn't, and we can blame weather partly for that, to thinking that perhaps the Cowboys defense can't handle Buffalo's offense. It's actually a matchup made in heaven for Josh Allen and John Brown in particular, because as we know, the Cowboys lend themselves to now just under 3 explosive plays per game, still struggle deep along the secondary, and we know John Brown will get involved over the top.
Josh Allen is quietly hitting his stride. 10 touchdowns, 1 interception with 4 rushing touchdowns in those 6 games since the bye week. He has had 6 fumbles.
Only 1 last 2 weeks, though.
Right. And we are...
Maybe 0, actually. Sorry.
We talked about him earlier in the year. And, if you really focus on Josh Allen, there's a lot to nitpick. There's even to say that he's not an above-average passer. Like, he's an adequate passer that is high variance. Well, what we are seeing now is this team hitting its stride. They understand who he is as a player, and that's why you bring in a Cole Beasley. That's why, he was able to hit John Brown on a deep shot last week. Dawson Knox emerging a little bit is helping. This defense is getting better. Ed Oliver, Matt Milano, they're all playing better. And again, this is an 8-3 team. Yet if we look at all the numbers, all the analytics, the DVOA for the offense is outside of the top 20. The defense is right league average around 15 or 16. That's not adding up to an 8-3 team. And again, the desert is giving them no respect here.
And we know Josh can make those wow plays a couple times a game. It's just limiting those wow turnovers where he looks freaking terrible. But he's done that the last 2 weeks. All right, he had actually no fumbles, I was mistaken, 1 interception, only 1 sack taken over the last 2 weeks. I know the Broncos away from Mile High aren't the greatest, and the Miami game is kind of a cake matchup. But still, even in that, they were competitive against the Patriots in Buffalo earlier this season. That's when you have a quarterback that can make really good plays against whoever he's playing. It at least gives you a chance to win these games. It's better than having someone that, has awful moments but doesn't have any good moments.
And they might have even won that game if Josh Allen played throughout because Matt Barkley had to come in.
And remember the second half against the Patriots, they moved into hurry-up mode, and it drove their offense down the field for a touchdown immediately after the half. The past 2 weeks, they've used more hurry-up, and it's actually helped them and given Buffalo's offense more play volume.
The next 2 games are telling. I think the Bills, no matter what, make the playoffs. They do play Dallas. They do play Baltimore after that. But, if you lose both those games, you're still 8-5, and just 1 or 2 more wins gets you into the playoffs. Devin Singletary, we are still seeing him get more and more work. He has great vision. He makes people miss.
Chunk plays every week.
But he really doesn't have that long speed that he's going to rack up like those 30, 40, 50-yard runs, which is fine. But this fits this team. Once again, like, you know, you look across the league and these teams still don't know who they are, right? They're still trying to figure it out right now. I would even throw in the Packers. Like, the Packers don't know who they are right now, despite knowing who they were 4 weeks ago. The Bills all year long have had this identity. And now's the time to hit that stride, even if people are doubting them.
Singletary's been Mr. Snap Rate all season. I mean, he's playing 70%, like he's on the field all the time. The problem is they're still making sure Gore gets his 10-plus carries per game. And anytime they go inside the 10-yard line, it's like Josh Allen just perks up and decides, okay, time for me to run this ball in. So, I mean, truly, that, you know, we talk about Josh Allen, all his rushing touchdowns, but it's limited him really enabling a fantasy-friendly running back to this point. I mean, he's had 22 starts. The top running back in the Bills has finished as an RB3 or worse, and 13 of those RB2 or better in 9. So, you know, even though Singletary, by his snaps and a little bit by his touches, should be a real, you know, high-end fantasy back. Just really hasn't been the case, and I'm not sure it's going to change.
What could you take from that Dallas loss to the New England Patriots? Again, weather was involved. Dak put on gloves like halfway through the second quarter because he was just missing wide-open shots to Randall Cobb. What I took from it is that offense versus defense, defense versus offense, the Cowboys really didn't lose that game, right? It was kind of on par with what the Patriots were bringing to the table. Now, what lost them the game was a blocked punt that ended, or that allowed the Patriots to get the ball at their own 13-yard line, then multiple missed field goals, and then that punt formation fiasco that allowed the Patriots to get 20 extra yards.
Coaching decisions. There was a lot. There was a lot that went into it.
But with all that said, with me sitting up here every single week and saying that the Cowboys have one of the best rosters in the NFL, they're 6-5 right now.
I can tell you that Randall Cobb has been the wide receiver 8 over the last 4 weeks. That's a full month of production now.
And you called him versus the Patriots.
Yeah, and so now the last 4 games, he's seen at least 7 targets, has caught at least 4 balls in all four of those games. We project Amari Cooper to see similar coverage. He was covered by Stephon Gilmore on 27 of 30 routes. He's going to get the same coverage from Tre'Davious White, most likely, who is not a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, but still someone we fear weekly. Amari Cooper's still a world beater. Like, you're still going back to him despite his goose egg last week. But Randall Cobb is still viable in this matchup. A matchup we project to be somewhat high scoring if Buffalo carries their share of offense. So yeah, I mean, I like Randall Cobb again as a wide receiver 3 and a high-end wide receiver 2.
I mean, Cobb's been the wide receiver 8, Gallup's been the wide receiver 11, Cooper's been the wide receiver 17. I mean, Dak's enabling all 3 of these guys to wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 1 production on a weekly basis. With that said, I mean, this is a Zeke game, right?
Sure.
Because, I mean, look, Bills 9th in DVOA against the pass, 27th against the run. You know, when the Eagles beat up on them, we saw them really just grind and, you know, attack that front 7. You know, I think the one weak spot in the Bills, and, you know, when we look at their defense from last year versus this year, the main difference was swapping Kyle Williams for Ed Oliver, and it looked like in the preseason, like, no problem with a top 10 pick, but don't think he's quite played up to that standard just yet, and they've struggled to kind of, again, just stop that strong power run games like the Eagles and potentially like the Cowboys. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
And even with Tony Pollard averaging 4 targets and 3 carries the past couple games, Ezekiel Elliott's still seen at least 3 targets in his last 3. So he's still involved in the passing game.
I'm really just hoping for a good Josh Allen performance on a roller coaster one.
I think you're going to get it.
I think you're going to get it as well, and that could make this game a lot of fun to watch.
I mean, you said before this last week's game, you called Jeff Driscoll 82% Josh Allen.
Correct.
And look how good Jeff Driscoll looked against the Cowboys.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Final game of Thanksgiving is the New Orleans Saints at the Atlanta Falcons. Saints on the road at 9-2 are 7-point favorites, a total of 49 in this game. Just a couple weeks ago, we saw these 2 teams battle it out. It was one of the big surprises of the season because the Falcons were absolute trash at the time. Then they go out there and start playing defense. It's like they learned in a week or 2 how to do it and sacked Drew Brees 6 times. That was actually in New Orleans. This one's in Atlanta. I highly doubt we see that similar of a performance this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw last week that this Falcons defense isn't going to be just this awesome unit moving forward. And even their players came out and said, like, we didn't change anything. We're just playing better. So, hey, kudos to them for playing better for 2 weeks. But again, I just think it's moving forward, particularly as long as their offense just really struggles to do anything. I mean, I know Matt Ryan started off the season with 300 plus in 6 straight games, but since then, and injuries, I think his ankle injury has had something to do with this, but 159 yards, 182 yards, 311, and then 271. You combine that with Brian Hill having 65 scoreless yards in this workhorse role over the last 2 weeks, and, the Falcons can't really move the ball.
It's going to be such a high-scoring affair. As you talked about the Falcons' defense, 11 sacks, those 2 contests we thought they had changed, or at least gave them potential to change, and then didn't sack Winston a single time.
Correct.
It was so bad, and I would expect, even with New Orleans potentially missing 2 offensive linemen, we don't have Tuesday injury reports just yet, I would still expect it to be a disastrous affair. New Orleans should put up points however they want.
And we don't know about Marshawn Lattimore either on the Saints defensive side of the ball right now. And we talked about it on Monday's episode, how, for many years, it seems like, we thought Drew Brees just didn't have this vertical arm in him anymore. Hopefully he shows it again this week. He showed it last week with 6 completions of 15-plus yards down the field. And something that the Saints did, which Tony Romo pointed out great in the CBS broadcast, is that they opened and started Latavius Murray. And they packed it in. I don't think Michael Thomas was on the field. And they really just wanted to key in on how the Panthers were going to play it defensively, what personnel, how they're going to line up. They came back to that same play later in the first quarter, and it resulted in Latavius Murray with a 28-yard run. I think it might have been even the same drive.
Yeah.
And so having Latavius like that, and then feeding Alvin Kamara in the second half, how this team, if Marshawn Lattimore can get healthy with Marcus Davenport emerging a little bit more on this defense, this is absolutely a Saints team that can make a Super Bowl run.
And I can't get over how good Jared Cook looks being.
I totally agree.
I mean, he's 32 years old, and even first game, Brees came back in week 10, 6 catches, 74 yards. The next week, he only had 2 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown, only had 2 targets. And last week, he goes for 699-1. The guy, he's getting the stats. If you watch the game, he's looking very athletic. He's making good routes, making good catches. And even last week, it could have been even bigger. I think he had kind of a phantom OPI that got called on but I don't know if the Falcons can score in this game, though. You're saying it's going to be such a high-scoring affair.
I think it'll be high-scoring, but that doesn't mean the Falcons score.
Okay, fair enough.
Even though I do think they'll score, but once again, we don't have Austin Hooper just yet. They will be getting Devontae Freeman back, whatever that means. So why do you not think, I'll play devil's advocate. Why do you not think they can score in this game?
I think they can score a little bit, but I think it's going to be their usual 20 points, and the 14 of those points are coming in the fourth
garbage
quarter
time,
when they're already down. I will say that with Devontae Freeman, this guy could become king garbage time fantasy asset moving forward. He's going to play 80% snaps because the Falcons have just gotten a 2-week stretch run look at what Brian Hill and Quadri Allison can do. We've seen in past years when they don't have an Ito Smith or a Tevin Coleman to split snaps, they do give Freeman this workhorse role. And who is the guy that used to get all the check down targets? Austin Hooper. He's on the sideline. So I don't know, man. I would not be surprised if Freeman has some not anything to write home about real life game, but you look at the box score and the guy has 11 catches for 80 yards.
We'll close with this, and maybe this is unfair of me to ask, but with the Atlanta Falcons, I'm more concerned if this team, their current window to win is just absolutely over. If this iteration of the Falcons that we're looking at right now, if it has to totally change before they can win football games again. Because offensively, this has been the team out there for a while, right? It's Matt Ryan to Julio Jones with Devontae Freeman in the backfield. Defensively, it seemed like for a little bit that they had this young, hungry, aggressive, explosive defense they wanted to build around, yet almost certainly Dan Quinn isn't going to be back on this team. His scheme, the style of players that he wants, not everyone wants on the outside, and a lot of those early round picks like a Vic Beasley, like a Tack McKinley, just aren't performing that well. It's really just Grady Jarrett and Deion Jones and some defensive backs and Keanu Neal, who's been injured. I understand that there's talent on this team, and really this Falcons team is built in the vision of Thomas Dimitroff and Dan Quinn, yet wins have not happened. 2 straight seasons. I know last year was injuries, but I do wonder if this is just kind of the end of the road for this identity that we're thinking about when we imagine what the Falcons are.
Not including Matt Ryan, would you say the Falcons have the worst roster in the NFC South?
I don't know. I mean, that Bucs defense is freaking atrocious. Is there one player in that Bucs defense?
It's a conversation, though.
It's a conversation.
And 3 years ago, it was holy crap, look at all this. Even their defense was never great, but you still saw playmakers out there, and that's been gone. And like we said, the offense, they put up some yards and points, but it's not like we've seen this we were all hoping once Sarkisian was gone that this offense was just really going to take a step forward, and that hasn't even come close to happening. The feel-good story of the year is Austin Hooper just getting so many check-down targets that he's turned into a fantasy tight end one. So,
and it's his contract year as well. So how do you even pay him with everything you have allotted to
you
other
have
positions?
you don't.
You do. You will pay Austin Hooper this offseason.
Austin Hooper is not a top 10 real life.
It's odd because you look and they do have playmakers, right? Like Ricardo Neal, Keanu Allen, Deion Jones. Like those guys should. Did I flip that?
Ricardo Allen, Keanu Neal.
Thank you. That's what I listed them off too quickly. But those guys should be playmakers, and they paid them a lot of money. But yeah, the defense is atrocious. Yeah. So I don't know what you do because you obviously have to rebuild. But we talked about this a few weeks ago,
right?
And nothing's changed.
Nothing. And they invest in their offensive line with 2 first-round picks this offseason, and
they can't run the ball. They couldn't run against Carolina.
I really think they should pay Austin Hooper.
Yeah.
You already have Julio Jones. You already have Calvin Ridley, and you think
you're not really paying Calvin Ridley right now.
Not right now, but why are you going to tie up cap? You think that tight end? You think Hooper is there? Like, look how bad they've been this year with him getting all these targets. I think if anything, it's an example of why they don't need Austin Hooper.
I will wager with you that they will pay Austin.
And Austin Hooper is fine. He's a very good NFL player, but like when we
you want those on your team?
Yes, but I don't want to pay him as a top 5 tight end in the league because he's not.
But then top 5 the next year turns into top 7, then the next year turns into top 10.
Fair. I mean,
I think they'll offer him a deal, but someone is going to just like topple him over with money. Someone's going to pay him as one of the league's highest tight ends.
I'm just saying he's the number 3 option in your pass game. How much do you want to pay that guy?
Yeah, it's more about backing up more salary because it's a case-by-case situation, and the Falcons can't afford to back up any more salary.
Yeah. That does it for us in here. Those are the 3 Thanksgiving Day games. Daigle and I will be back tomorrow with 6 previews for Sunday's matchup. It's just me and Daigle. We're just going to be sitting here.
I like the audio only because it makes me feel like I went to school for radio, so it makes me feel like radio.
Did you? I didn't know
before
that.
radio died. Well, I mean, this is what we're doing. It's radio, right?
No, it is. It was just the camera being there.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't know you went to school for radio.
It's the same thing. Podcasting, radio.
There was in 2007, there was a radio major that you could just go and pursue. It was a broadcast communications.
It was broadcast communications.
Okay. Same thing.
That's what I say. It's same
what
thing.
was your radio call name? Ours was WSOE 89.3.
We're not saying that.
The only alternative
it was so bad.
at Elon University.
What
was it?
It was so bad.
It was real bad.
Remember what year it was, okay?
2007, 2008.
So who was popular in 2007, 2008 to a college kid?
Wiz Khalifa.
I'll save you time.
Lil Wayne.
I'll save you time. It was DJ Blink.
Who was DJ Blink?
Who?
For Blink 182. Now
that was 1997.
Now let's get going. Let's end it on that.
Wrong.
Let's end it on that.
Oh my gosh.
I told you I
Talk
should have
Sports?
kept it to myself. You listen. You're in college. You're just an idiot.
John, stick to sports.
You're just an idiot.
All right. That does it for us. Everyone out there.
Thanksgiving preview. Let's talk about everything
Thanks
else.
so much for listening. If you do enjoy the show, hit that subscribe button. Tell one friend. We'll talk to you all soon. See ya.